2,000 years ago, a man carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. Not for glory, not for vengeance, but for love. This is the story of his final hours. The story that changed everything. The Passion of Christ. Told through light, pain, and divine purpose.
Resolutely toward the sacrifice that would redeem the world. He gathered his disciples for one last meal in an upper room in Jerusalem. The air was heavy with tension, an almost tangible weight of anticipation lingering in the dimly lit room. The disciples, unaware of the full extent of what lay ahead, reclined at the table, their voices subdued. Suddenly, Jesus broke the silence. "Truly, I tell you, one of you will betray me." The impact of his words struck like thunder, leaving everyone stunned. Faces turned toward him in shock, and one by one they began to ask, "Is it I, Lord?" Their voices trembled with fear and disbelief as doubt crept into their hearts. Judas, his resolve hardened, but his guilt lingering, muttered, "Is it I, Master?" Jesus, with a piercing yet sorrowful look, replied, "You have said so." As the meal continued, Jesus took bread into his hands, broke it, and handed it to his disciples. "Take and eat. This is my body," he said, his voice steady and full of meaning. Then he took the cup, lifted it, and gave thanks before passing it to them. "Drink from it, all of you, for this is my blood of the new covenant, poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins." The room fell silent, the gravity of his words settling over them like a veil. Jesus instructed them, "Do this in remembrance of me." This act, simple yet profound, would become the cornerstone of the Christian faith, a moment of divine grace woven into the fabric of human history. Even as he spoke, the shadow of betrayal and the weight of the cross loomed ever closer. After the meal, Jesus led his disciples through the quiet streets of Jerusalem to the Garden of Gethsemane. The night was still, the air heavy with the scent of olive trees. With deep sorrow in his voice, he confided to Peter, James, and John, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." He withdrew to pray alone, falling to the ground, his agony so profound that his sweat became like drops of blood falling to the earth. "Father," he pleaded, "if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will." In this moment, his humanity and divinity were laid bare. His willingness to embrace the Father's will despite the cost. Returning to his disciples, he found them sleeping, their weariness overtaking their resolve. "Could you not keep watch with me for 1 hour?" he asked gently. He withdrew again, praying with the same intensity, before finally rising, his face set with resolve. "The hour has come," he said. Suddenly, the stillness of the garden was shattered by the sound of clinking armor and hurried footsteps. An armed crowd, led by Judas, approached under the cover of night. The betrayer stepped forward, his face illuminated by flickering torchlight. "Hail, Master," he said, his voice devoid of sincerity. As he leaned in to greet Jesus with a kiss, a symbol of affection turned into a mark of betrayal. Jesus, his voice tinged with sadness, asked, "Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss?" His words cut through the chaos, filled with both sorrow and piercing truth. As the soldiers moved to seize him, Peter, in a surge of misguided loyalty, drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. "Put your sword back in its place," Jesus commanded, his voice firm yet calm. "For all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Do you think I cannot call on my Father, and he will at once put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels? But how then would the scriptures be fulfilled that say it must happen in this way?" Jesus reached out and touched the servant, healing his ear, a final act of compassion even in the face of betrayal. The soldiers then seized him, binding his hands as if he were a common criminal. The disciples, overcome with fear and confusion, scattered into the darkness, leaving Jesus alone to face his accusers. Dragged before the Sanhedrin, Jesus stood bruised yet resolute. The chief priests and elders hurled accusations, seeking false witnesses to condemn him. "Tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God," they demanded, their voices filled with malice. Jesus replied, "If I tell you, you will not believe, and if I ask you, you will not answer. But from now on, the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of the power of God." "Are you then the Son of God?" they insisted, their question charged with venom. "You say that I am," Jesus declared, his words steady and unshaken. The high priest, enraged, tore his garments and shouted, "Blasphemy! Why do we need any more witnesses? You have heard it for yourselves. What do you think?" "He deserves to die," came the cry from the council, their verdict sealed by their hardened hearts. As dawn broke, Jesus was brought before Pilate, the Roman governor. The religious leaders, unwilling to let their plot falter, presented him as a political threat. "This man claims to be a king and stirs up rebellion against Caesar," they accused. Pilate, unimpressed by their zeal, turned to Jesus. "Are you the king of the Jews?" "You say so," Jesus replied calmly, his composure unbroken. Pilate, marveling at Jesus' restraint amidst the relentless accusations, found no fault in him. "I find no basis for a charge against this man," he declared. But the crowd, stirred up by the chief priests, demanded action. In an attempt to pacify them, Pilate offered a customary choice. "Whom do you want me to release to you? Barabbas, a murderer and insurrectionist, or Jesus, who is called the Christ?" "Barabbas!" the crowd roared, their voices unified in defiance. "What shall I do then with Jesus, who is called the Christ?" Pilate asked, his voice tinged with hesitation. "Crucify him!" they shouted, their hatred swelling to a deafening crescendo. "Why? What crime has he committed?" Pilate pressed, hoping to reason with them. But the crowd was unrelenting. "Crucify him!" Seeing that he was gaining nothing, Pilate symbolically washed his hands before the crowd. "I am innocent of this man's blood," he said. "It is your responsibility." The people answered, "His blood be on us and on our children." Reluctantly, Pilate conceded. Jesus was handed over to be flogged. The Roman soldiers took him away, their cruelty unchecked. They stripped him and tied him to a post, lashing him repeatedly with a whip embedded with metal and bone. Each strike tore into his flesh, leaving him bloodied and broken. Yet even in his agony, Jesus bore the suffering without complaint, resolute in his mission to redeem the world. The Roman soldiers showed no mercy as they mocked Jesus with cruel disdain. They wove a crown of thorns and pressed it onto his head, each thorn piercing his skin as blood trickled down his face. They sneered with derision. "Hail, King of the Jews!" Their mockery knew no bounds as they struck him repeatedly, spit on him, and knelt before him in false homage. The humiliation added to the physical agony, yet Jesus endured it all in silence. Weakened from the flogging, Jesus was forced to carry his own cross through the streets of Jerusalem toward Golgotha, the place of the skull. The weight of the wood bore down on his battered body, causing him to stumble. A man named Simon of Cyrene, passing by, was compelled by the soldiers to help him carry the cross. Along the way, women from the crowd wailed in sorrow. Turning to them, Jesus, despite his suffering, spoke with compassion. "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children." Arriving at Golgotha, the soldiers drove nails through his hands and feet, fastening him to the cross. They hoisted it upright, and Jesus, suspended between heaven and earth, bore the weight of the world's sin. In the midst of his unimaginable pain, he lifted his voice to heaven. "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." Even in his agony, his love and mercy shone. 2 thieves were crucified alongside him, one on his right and the other on his left. One of them, consumed by anger, mocked him, saying, "Aren't you the Christ? Save yourself and us." But the other thief, filled with remorse, rebuked his companion. "Do you not fear God, since you are under the same sentence? We are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve, but this man has done nothing wrong." Turning to Jesus, he pleaded, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." With profound compassion, Jesus replied, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." At noon, darkness enveloped the land, an eerie silence falling over the scene as creation itself seemed to mourn. For 3 hours, the sun refused to shine. Near the end, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, my God, why have you forsaken me?" In this cry of desolation, he bore the full weight of humanity's sin and separation from God. Moments later, Jesus declared, "It is finished." With his final breath, he prayed, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." Then he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. At that instant, the ground trembled violently and rocks split apart. In the temple, the thick veil that separated the Holy of Holies was torn in two from top to bottom, symbolizing that the barrier between God and humanity had been forever removed. A Roman centurion, witnessing the events, was filled with awe and declared, "Truly, this man was the Son of God." Jesus' lifeless body was taken down from the cross by Joseph of Arimathea, a wealthy disciple, and Nicodemus, who had come to Jesus by night. They wrapped his body in linen and placed it in a new tomb carved out of rock. A large stone was rolled across the entrance, and guards were stationed to secure it.